Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, June 29th, 2023. It is 2:16 p.m. in council chambers at Sandpoint City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. And this special meeting of the Selkirk Fire Service Joint Powers Board is now called to order. For the record, I am Jennifer Stapleton, Board Executive Director presiding. Also present are members of the board, Jim Woodward representing the Saco Fire District and Ken Deck representing the West Side Fire District. Kate was she coming late, Tammy, or she wasn't available today? Okay, she was. Kate McAllister, representative for the city of Sandpoint, is absent, but may be joining us during the meeting. Chief Gavin Gilcrease will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone will stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, do we have any members of the public participating remotely? No, we don't. And no members of the public in the room today, so I guess we do not have public comments. Are there any general announcements from board members or staff? Okay. I am going to put meeting minutes on hold, table that for the next meeting, Tammy, for the April 27th, May 25th, and June 15th meetings, because we are still trying to get all three commissioners in a meeting. So I anticipate that will happen for our July meeting. Old business, our last item and what our agenda is really about today is discussing and making a decision about the proposed JPA budget for fiscal year 24. Chief, do you want to give a brief presentation on the edits made from the last meeting? And that was all sent out to the JPA board members yesterday.
Correct. So what we did, so basically the numbers themselves did not change. I made some corrections. There was a couple corrections inside of the PowerPoint. The one that listed the actuals for the last 2 years versus the budget for 23 and 24. The actuals I had mistakenly put in revenue instead of expenditure, so there should have been zero rather than $100,000+ deals in there. On the spreadsheet for the actual budgets, I went through and line item by line item, just kind of went through and reallocated to where those aligned more with what the actual would be for the budget through the Sago and through the West Side districts. Again, it didn't change any of the overall balance numbers at the end, but we did reallocate those inside the budget. Let's see, it went, where we had some of the service and arm equipment. I knew that, West Side had like roughly, I don't know, it was like $500 in there. So we reallocated that one to 3,000 moved. The big one was the operational supplies and equipment, whereas West Side really didn't have anything in theirs. Theirs was brought to 9260, brought up the medical supplies, and also kind of evened out that the machine, vehicle machine parts. Let me see what else. I think that was the two biggest ones that we did.
Any questions? Board members?
Yeah, that was the biggest one that we had.
Yeah, I want to ask a few questions
Okay.
on the budget then. So I need a little bit of refresher. I'm on the page titled JPA Shared Cost Overview. Just can't tell what page it is, I'm looking at a tiny screen on the phone. But on the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah,
I can pull it up and
That'd
put
be
it on there if, I need a link to the thingy, right?
Yes.
yeah, it's Samuel.
Can you just email me one? please, real
No, I
quick?
sent one to you before. I can't email you one from here.
Yeah, I don't, that one said you already have something in progress, it wouldn't let me log in, so I don't know what the deal was with that.
Let me go send you one.
I would pull it up online, but I don't think I have this. I don't think I have a Zoom link. Did she send one to you, Sarah?
No,
Okay.
do not believe.
Yeah, the one she sent, the
No.
last one, it wouldn't, it was like blocked out and then in.
No, I just got the email, or the meeting with attachments.
Then is this thing you're talking about, so we can pull it up and this, is that the one you're talking
And the next page.
about? The very next one.
Sorry.
That one there.
Yeah.
Oh, for you, okay.
Which page is it? Devin?
Sorry, it is slide 7. The GPA shared cost overview.
And what was your, you got it.
So like, what I was trying to remember, we had quite an increase between 22 and 23. And I was trying to remember that, and then looking at 23 to 24, we're still at 14% increase. So I'm trying to understand what's driving those increases in the shared cost.
So those were the increase is in the fire administrative cost.
I know there was 5,000, I believe, for training, there was,
Yeah, we did add, we added some additional funds to the PPE. We added a little bit more into training. I think that there was a little bit of adjustment to fuel as well as, adding another cell phone for the deputy, and there was something, I think there was something else that was,
I guess what I'm thinking is that that's a 15% of our budget. And so then when we go back to generate a budget at the district level, then we're at 14%. So now we can't, and then we have a state allowable budget increase. So now we've taken up. We hindered ourselves at each of the individual agencies when the overall budget, that shared cost is going up. So we'll have to have 2%, 2 point something percent is all we can work with back at the district level. And so that's why I'm trying to understand. And I wonder if we, going forward, maybe we have to start to think of this as all components of the budget, or we have to break this in so that we can limit the increases in the different parts of the budget so that we're not hampering ourselves in the non-shared portion of the budget. It starts to take away some flexibility from what we can do at the district level.
you also budgeted 15,000 for the JPA or the human resources for bringing in somebody for that. That wasn't in the budget last year because we didn't have that.
the
That's for our
negotiation. deal.
negotiations.
Didn't you have a slide that had what the increases were?
I don't remember. Top of my head.
Well, I'm looking, you've got the slide on the budget components.
I think it's just, I think it is in the, it's on the spreadsheet, I know, but I don't know if it's listed out on here. I think that's just more of a
I
highlight.
think we could go off here and you could probably refer back to the spreadsheet so we can go by the components and where the increases.
It's
Where the
15.
increases are. What I'm thinking is, it is your slide on page 9 on your slide, where you're showing the fire service budget components. So it's showing what are the elements of the administrative.
Mhm.
And I think that's where the question is.
Yeah, and I think that just the question for me is if we're going to allow one part of the budget to
Yeah.
increase at a greater rate than what we're allowed in overall, and I just start to tie our hands on some of the things we might want to be doing. I don't, it's not a,
You'll have to speak to what are the elements of the increase. Gavin, I know some of the elements off the top of my head, I know I can speak to it. On fire administration, we did have, and so it will be included in this budget, we had a scale adjustment for our personnel on our general salary scale based on market analysis. So that would have included the chief and the deputy chief. Council just approved a overall scale adjustment, so we're in line with market of 4%. So you are seeing that 4% increase for fire administration services. And that would have been across all of our positions. So that would have been the portion of our administrative assistant that is shared fire service costs, the fire chief, as well as the deputy chief, that would be included here. In administrative services, you're going to see some of that with general admin services from staff across the city. It's not going to be a substantial difference, but when you're covering 100% of salary for 2 of the fire positions, obviously you're going to see that 4% across. We also, with the deputy fire chief, when we did our benchmarking analysis, we had that position in our grade system at 1 grade level, and we adjusted it up a grade based on where the market is. So that probably is contributing to, it's not going to be a full percent. That's probably going to be something like a 0.2 or a 0.3 with adjusting on that scale. On the liability insurance that is shared across the agencies, so that's going to be ICRIMP. We did see our ICRIMP premiums come in at a 35% increase because of all of the claims. So that was a large increase that you're going to see spread across fire, but we saw across the city, and probably even for the elements for, I didn't see what your renewals were for the 2 fire districts, but I'm going to guess you probably saw an increase in your individual budgets.
It did go up a little bit, but it was more the, it wasn't like the fire districts have the
Yeah,
like building insurance and vehicle insurance and stuff like that. Those didn't really go up, but it's the personnel side of it is what really took the hit. Those
Yeah.
are pretty much exactly the same as they were last year.
Okay. And that's due to claims in the insurance pool. And I do know there were a substantial number, not necessarily here, but across the insurance pool for ICRIMP. So general liability insurance went up. I know our premium was 35% increase. So that's the biggest increase we've ever seen from, I can think of my time here. Other elements in that?
Yeah, the other stuff outside of, I mean, we did talk about adding the 15,000 in for the human resources for the negotiation for that. I believe it's the attorney that comes in for that. We did increase, just going down the list, we increased the JPA automotive R&M because the deputy chief's vehicles now will be in service. It's been we basically got a tune up on it one time last year. We added, we doubled the cell phone. We added $5,000 to training. That was just on the premise that we believe that we were gonna have some additional training this year. I think that we're actually gonna be able to realize some cost savings in that one, but I don't know right off the top of my head. I just have to go back and look and see what we're doing right now. We did add about 2,000 more to the uniforms. And we increased our safety, our PPE, went up almost $8,000. We had a price increase on the actual turnouts themselves. But we also had three additional sets that we're gonna have to purchase going into next year in addition to what our normal rotation would be. And I would say the other largest portion of that would be our IT expenditure. Our licensure went up for Office 365. I can't remember off the top of my head what we were paying, but it jumped up to like $400 a person versus 110 or something like that a person. So that was a pretty big increase on that. We didn't really see anything, I don't think, on the net motion side or any of our radio agreements. I don't think we didn't see any increases on that, so.
So when you take the 15 from the human resources, the 5, the 2, the 10, that's $32,000, just an increase in those 4 areas alone. So that is 15%. That's your increase right there.
The difference
Yeah,
between
that's the big-
589 and 5, it was.
I mean, that's besides the regular, just like what you talked about, the 3%. And when I did the initially, when I had given you guys the numbers, it was like a 3% increase for the salaries and wages for the JPA portion of it. That wasn't what was driving it. It was these other ones that were driving the large increase. Gavin, the turnouts and PPE, is that like a one-time increase and then come back down next year? Is that gonna, do you feel that that's gonna be?
Well, what we do is we try and, I guess the object is that the PPE, for the safety factor of it, everybody needs 2 sets. And so if they don't have 2 sets while their gear is, if it's contaminated and it's being cleaned, they don't have anything right to wear. So our plan is to replace, we try to budget 6 sets a year for replacement. So and they're good for roughly the maximum you can get out of a set of gear is 10 years. So what we try to do is we try to replace this set every 5. So that way, every 5th year when they get their new set, their current set rolls into their backup gear. And then at the end, when they get their next set, then that backup gear goes out of service and it's done with. So that's our plan, and we have 26 people, so the rotation on that, I think we did it where we could do 30 over the course of 5 years, 30 sets. That way we had some wiggle room in there, but yeah, with people leaving, we have to get them gear that fits, because we can't hire people to fit the gear.
It looks to me
that would be
like
optimal.
almost the vast majority of your increase in fire administrative cost is the 15% for CBA, or 15,000 for our CBA negotiation, which is, it's really a one-time cost. It's a recurring cost that we see come up every 3 or 4 years, depending on the term of the CBA, but that wouldn't be a cost that would be carried over into the next fiscal year.
Right.
I think we were looking for 74,000 total. That's the last year to this year, 74,000. So we 15 on the negotiation. But then you had some other numbers there.
Yeah, I can wrap. Is that the medical that the union is allocated?
No, that's gonna be our general liability insurance, so it's covering us for employment claims. Really, it's primarily gonna be for employment claims, and general liability is what flows through the shared costs in the GPA. And then the specific insurance costs for equipment and the buildings, the stations themselves, those are billed and separated out with ICRIM to each of the three entities individually.
So you have something that was a driver of employment claim?
It was across the whole, ICRIM saw an increase in employment related claims across their whole sector. It wasn't
So one specific to,
specific to Sandpoint or any of the three agencies.
Mostly Facebook cross highway right there.
They're not even in ICRIM anymore, but there may be some others like them.
So when you look at this ICRIM line, Jennifer, the one on page 2, and it shows 5,000 Sagal, 3,000 West Side, 38 combined or shared. Why are we annotated that way where the Sandpoint doesn't have a dedicated portion?
Because we have a dedicated portion, but it's not in the fire budget. That's where we talked the last time about us not really, when you're looking at the cost of fire services. Sandpoint, it kind of becomes an anomaly because a lot of our general operating costs are sitting in our overall city budget, and you're not going to see them allocated to specifically fire.
Okay.
And where you're seeing that 5,000 and that 3,000 to the two districts, that's going to be your direct portion. Whereas that 38,000, that's going to be general liability, that then is shared across the three agencies. And that's where we saw the increase was in general liability.
And those are budgets, and then there are actuals based on billing from ICRIM. Is that how that's been handled, or?
We've already got our premium.
Yeah.
For next year, notification from ICRIM. So what we budgeted is what will be the actual cost for next year.
Okay.
They come out with their premiums in about May or June.
Ours were, Jim, right about double before the employees switched over to the like everybody under the city umbrella. Our original premiums for that were almost 11,000 for Sagal. And it was right about, it was 5 and some change for the west side, but they basically got cut in half. We didn't really see too much of it in 21, but in 22 is when we saw it cut down.
There should have been a savings because what ICRIM had told us is the rates, even with the increase of the 35%, the general liability rates for general purpose governments are less than fire districts. They actually have more claims in special purpose governments than general purpose governments because of more infrastructure with HR and those elements. So overall costs for ICRIM, at least for that given year, had gone down for all three agencies and are presumably actually down in fiscal year 24 versus us all having our separate coverages.
Okay.
IT costs have increased over past years. And what that is related to is getting the fire service system on a properly designed system with appropriate backups and security measures built in. So it was more of kind of a homegrown system and a home application for how Microsoft Office products and other things were working for fire. And they've now been fully integrated with Microsoft Office 365 that we're doing at the city with on-premises backups, cloud-based backups, and security measures. So our IT costs generally at the city have gone up over the last 2 years as we've been significantly strengthening our IT measures. And that was, again, a huge focus. When I was down last week at the Association of Idaho Cities, ICRIM did had a feature presentation at lunch specifically about cybersecurity and the issues for special purpose and local units of government and the liability on that front. It used to be an I-crimp, so I think it is built into our general liability. It used to be you had to opt in for cybersecurity insurance. We had always opted out. Now it's not an option to opt out for that, so I think it's built into our overall rates. And that's probably accounting for some of the increase also.
So on that upgrade, moved offsite backups.
Yeah. So we do on premises backups, and that's across every unit here at the city, including all of fire. So all of the fire computers are now fully networked into the general server here at the city, and then we're doing cloud-based backups as well. And then we've got, with our cloud-based backups, we just implemented a new system almost a year ago now. And fire is in that solution where we're paying not only for the CGIS compliant cloud backups, which because you're using Spillman and NetMotion and fire across everything it's doing needs to be CGIS compliant. And that was the issue with what was happening with the prior setup, as it wasn't all CGIS compliant. And there's audits that happen every year to make sure, particularly our public safety services, are CGIS compliant. In our backup solution, it's not only just a matter of sending it to the cloud, it's also a technical team that in the event of a catastrophe, they're going to restore all services in conjunction with the city in 48 hours.
It's just getting, I'm just expressing a concern that just getting into a pinch as we continue our payroll costs and then our admin costs keep driving toward 100% of the budget. For Sagal Fire District, it's an 18% increase on this portion of the budget. And that, so at some point we have to do something. We're gonna get blocked.
I think as we mentioned at the last meeting, I think there are some opportunities too for some administrative efficiencies that can potentially reduce some of the admin costs. We talk about the payroll periods, for example. It's manual payroll. And so the allocation of finance time in particular for fire payroll is substantial, especially when compared to processing payroll across the rest of the city. If we were to look at switching from our current 28 pay period to a 14-day pay period, that would be one way of reducing overhead costs. It's certainly not going to get at the 18%, but that's one of the low-hanging fruit we look at as a mechanism for reducing administrative costs. And that will be subject to obviously collective bargaining.
The state law, Jim, or what is?
The budget caps, the taxing district can only grow its budget from 1 year to the next by 3%. So if it, correct me, you're
Yeah.
$100,000 budget next year, you can be 103 plus a couple other allowances in code. So
each district is bound by that 3% increase.
a cap in.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
anyone, any person, any individual in the district may see as their property taxes or their assessed value changes, they may see more than 3%, but the budget that the taxing district proposes can only increase by 3%. Plus, if what are the others? I mean, if
Plus
you
your
have
new
urban
construction rules.
construction, or if you have urban renewal coming off.
Yes.
It,
Yeah.
Is that just
we're-
a way to maintain just consistency, like year over year, or is it?
well, the intent there is control of the budget so that they don't just get excessive because. And so it's the state government weighing in against on what subunits of government can do. And I would imagine there's some history there that section of code came about because there were subunits of government who were. And so when people are unhappy because their taxes are going up, then they turn to their representative in state government, and then somebody in Boise writes a law.
So something like the human resources, that's not an annually budgeted item, is not an exception.
No, that's where some of the constraints is, and
Yeah.
where some of the contention is,
Yeah.
because the cities, the counties, the law is just 3 years old now, probably 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
There was a little bit more flexibility before. But there's definitely a limit in place.
That's interesting.
Yeah, one of the huge impacts with that law that was passed that West Side will see is when the end of the Dura Urban Renewal District comes to an end, only 80% of that value comes on the tax rolls.
That's right, there's 80%.
Yeah. So we've got the same issue to look ahead here in Sandpoint, because we've got Sura over in Sagal. Right now, you don't have any urban renewal districts or areas, so, but for West Side, that's gonna be a major issue with that limitation, because so much of the development there is in urban renewal.
And about the time it sunsets, it'll be built out. There's not really, in that area, there's not really, I mean, there's not even really any place to infill over there. It's just, it's gonna be done.
Interesting law.
Yeah, it doesn't take into account inflation, and when I was looking at it and then argued against some of this. If we look at the consumer price index, there's another index, so it's the cost of goods for governments. When you look at fuel, tires, paving oil, and it's typically, so that index is about twice what the CPI is. So someone would make the argument, well, that consumer price index is only going up 3%. Well, that doesn't mean that the fire districts and costs are going up 3%.
Well, and just like you said, upgrading the IT system and security and everything else. Some of that, you're improving your system, but in another sense, it's kind of handcuffing you
Mhm.
in other ways, so.
I think it's for all I think it's particularly in this time of inflation, not only for the consumer price, but then particularly the competitiveness of the job market and trying to retain staff. And so we're having to look at things like grade adjustments for how we're competing with the market. We're having to look at then what we're doing with COLAs and we then on the other side are balancing all of that with a 3% cap, cost of fuel going up. It's becoming a real challenge for the local governments in addressing those cost increases that I would argue on the other side are out of our control as well. If we want to retain people.
So, Chief, have you already worked the district budgets then?
Yeah, the district budgets, going on this, I got an email from, some mail for final number stuff from the county yesterday, late, so I just got to take a look at that, but we're gonna be pretty close.
Okay, because if we were to limit my math here says that if we were to limit Sagal Fire District to a 3% increase, and we did 18% increase on 15% of the budget, then the remaining budget, 85%, we can increase it by 0.3% to come up with a total 3%. So that's.
So you also
challenge.
gotta factor in your new construction rules too. You're getting like, I don't know, a lot from that. So you got your 3% plus your new construction. So that's like about I think, I don't know how.
What
that
were
percentage-
new construction rules
Yeah.
for Sagal? Cause I know yours were
They
the
were
highest.
double, three
Well, that
times.
was
amount of
assessed
stamp
values,
fees.
that's not.
But it goes into what you get for your.
You're getting your
property
3%
tax.
plus your,
Yes.
plus your new construction rules.
That was it, but before we were looking at assessed values that have gone up significantly, but the new
But
construction.
we should have our year, what were the new construction
Is that
roll
the-
amounts? You
is
should
that
have
Not
that.
the ones that are in the PowerPoint slide, that's something different than that.
Not the ones in the PowerPoint.
The
slide?
PowerPoint slide is assessed value.
That was
and
assessed
so-
Yeah, that was different.
No,
Yeah,
but
that just
you've
changes
got
the mill
your-
rate.
You've got your new construction roll amounts for the two districts in your revenues.
When you did your L2s and
No,
plugged
yeah,
in your stuff and you got that, the new construction rolls. I believe off the top of my head, it was like around 50 million for the new
That's-
construction
that's-
rolls, which if you open up your draft L2s, you should see how much that equals on of new revenue. Cause you gotta look at that total. It's a
Yeah,
3%
you have to
plus
look at
that
your
total. It's
3%,
like a
yes.
6 or 7%. And I'm just throwing out numbers. I don't know
Yeah.
what his is, but it's way more than 3% because your new constructions were, I think, 3 times the amount of Sandpoints were. And I have that schedule for everybody in the county if you want me to find that L2.
That would be helpful, Sarah, and my suggestion would be that when you present this to the budgets to the district, you probably under your revenues want to, I don't know what you're doing with the PowerPoint, or if you're only giving them this, if you're giving them a spreadsheet, is to break out that property tax showing what's property taxes with the 3%, but specifically identifying your new construction rolls.
Sego was
That's
50.
what we're typically doing.
Yep, Sego was $57 million for new construction rolls. Ours is Sandpoint only 15 million, so that
And
is
then do you have-
significant.
But you don't have the L2,
57, 398, 965.
but translate that for him off your L2 as to what that,
Allows you to collect.
yeah,
The allowable was 50,500.
That's a significant, so that down that percent, then how much was your 3%?
3% was 48.
So there you go, there's almost
Yeah.
7%, a total, if you take the 3% plus. Cause that is gonna be a little more than 3% for your new construction rolls.
So what you're saying is,
Those are the limits, so that's what you can take, but part of the role of a district commissioner also is to responsibly spend the taxpayers' money. And so it's not, that doesn't mean taking the limit all the time.
what you're saying is the 3%, so an additional
almost 4, probably.
because of the 50,000 in new construction,
50
Yes,
million,
yeah,
50 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
57 million in new construction, which allows you to tax an additional $50,000.
Yeah, I think our baseline was 1.63, and then we added the 48, and then if you add the 50. By the time you get to the end, it runs to about 1.77.
I think it's been common that we've been seeing across the state because of new construction rules that local units of government in many cases have not had to take their 3% because new construction rules, they've either taken a lesser amount or they haven't had to take any, but from being down in Boise and part of discussions, for the most part, everyone this year has been forced into their 3% just because of inflationary costs.
So there's a total 8% maximum also. So even if you had 3% plus enough new construction to get you to 9, you still are limited to 8.
Mhm.
West Side was $20 million.
Yes,
That's how
it's
California
been
was
made
bad.
better now that urban renewal coming off. Also, your 8 wasn't considering
Yes.
that because that
Yeah.
was disastrous.
That was disastrous, yes. West Side was 20 million for new construction rolls.
So does that translates into how much in revenue?
I have to pull it up. Hold on one second.
Same ratio, I guess. So a third, so
Roughly.
17,000 or so.
It was almost 12, 11.9.
Well, so it's not ratioed.
There were Percy rates, were they going up on the employer side for public safety?
Quite a
You've got
bit.
that going in your budget too.
Yep. And they're gonna be significantly higher next year. I think an additional 2% more on top of that next fiscal year, not this coming one, but the one after that. And they're projected to increase for the next 3 years substantially.
We're seeing
The
the Percy rates and public
And
safety,
employees.
so
Oh,
that's gonna be the retirement program. We're seeing increases in general, but in public safety, they're significantly higher than in general employees, non-public safety.
What's driving, you know, what's driving those like that?
The age of retirement rule of 80 instead of rule of 90,
They've changed for.
because
And
you,
also
people are, get
the
up.
market has significantly done that, because when market goes down, they still have to have to pay out those employee, those retired people, so that is. They look at that every year and they reassess that, the Percy, Idaho does, and then they come out with their new rates that they, need to increase.
To cover costs.
Is
Yeah.
Idaho safety 50 years old?
That's rule of 80, so years of service plus age. It is, if 30 years of service and 50 years old, then 30 plus 50 is 80, you can retire. Or 28 years and age 52.
And it's a percentage at that point.
Yes,
That's the full, whatever the full percentage is, but, right?
it's the,
Like,
yes,
get
it's
the full of
the
80.
percentage of your highest 12 months, is it
High
12 months?
3 year, high 3.
3
That's
So like
3 years,
California
12 years.
PERS was 3% for safety at 50. So if they had 25 years, they got 75% of what they were making at the time they retired.
Yeah, it's a little bit different.
It's a
than
little
that.
bit different
Yeah,
here.
but there is still, I think there's a ratio formula too, if you
Yes.
don't, if you retire and you're not at
Yes,
maxed out.
yes.
I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, because the military is similar. Point system.
But you've also got included then overall in your admin budget, you've got some pretty significant increases in Percy, and those are effective July.
The first one is, yes. Yeah, and then, well, that's this fiscal year, and then next fiscal year, I have another increase. So for regular employees, that's in the budget, ours has actually gone down, and then we'll go back up. The public safety's gone up and up.
They could be asking a lot of questions. I'm just trying to
No,
learn.
no, I think it's good.
It's
Yeah.
definitely worth
And
talking about.
anything we can help with at this meeting, I think is good.
And
A lot of
I just see us getting in a position where. It's my concern, and I think it's already present, is that so much of our budget is occupied or is used up by personnel and overhead. That then when it comes time to make capital investments, we don't have any way to do it. You're making payments, and you can finance something and figure out a way to make payment on a new fire engine. But so then we're always looking to and hoping for grants of some sort, try and purchase a fire engine, but.
Well, and when you have to stay competitive in the job market and other places are going up, you don't want to again lose those people, but then we also have had discussions about how do we add people? Well, there's not if you can only grow your budget by a certain amount, that makes it very difficult to start adding personnel. And that just drives those admin costs that much more.
I think one of our substantial areas, I think this JPA board is going to need to look at is your cost of employee benefits. And that again is gonna have to wait until negotiations, but the cost of medical insurance, and it's a stipend getting paid to fire employees, but that stipend is still as compared to cost of insurance over the city. There's a difference in, like, when you get into family amounts of $500 a month. So we've been able to implement measures to get our costs of insurance going down, and that's not reflected in necessarily doing a stipend, but then the challenge, I think, so the cost for that stipend are much higher, as well as a number of the other benefits for fire employees as compared to other employees. When we look across the city, there's significantly higher costs and more benefits in fire than what we have in police or anywhere else. And I think that's one thing you're gonna have
Because
to,
of what they negotiated.
yeah. And particularly where I look at trying to get some of the cost control back, I think that you're potentially gonna have to look at is gonna be around medical benefit contributions, because it's substantially higher. And even with the structure that then has happened, and I think this is a real challenge within recruiting new employees. what was negotiated was there was a stipend, and then how that is allocated across the employees was left to the union to determine what benefit they wanted, what care they wanted, as well as then how they were going to allocate rates across employees. They voted and determined that the employees were going to share equally in the cost for insurance. And so what you've got then is you've got new firefighters coming on that have been hired that are they're only covering themselves, and they're paying $500 a month for that coverage. Whereas across the rest of our structure, our benefit structure in the city for employee only, they pay nothing for coverage. So cost out of pocket's higher, allocation and perception and retention of employees who are looking at only coverage for themselves is an issue, I think, in fire service. Particularly when we're hiring people on at the level, it's our lowest end. And you have to think at the lowest end, those people making in low 20s per hour are paying $500 a month in medical coverage.
I think fire is going up again.
Yeah.
When it, I think they just,
6%.
yeah, they just got another one.
Yeah. And so the argument could be made then that the agencies are gonna need to pay for a greater stipend, but then when you compare group insurances, there's other options that are substantially cheaper. All right,
Don't even think about building a fire station.
Got one you can't man.
That'd be gone.
We've got enough of those.
Yeah.
so I don't know if one of you wants to make a motion at this point, but I will remind you the purpose of the JPA board and that role relative to the budget. The role of the JPA board is to approve a system-wide budget and recommend to each of the 3 participating agencies that they adopt the budget consistent with the overall system budget as presented.
I move that we approve the budget as shown for a total system-wide budget recommended a system-wide budget of $3,658,600 with a shared cost total of $589,059.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and proposed JPA budget for fiscal year 24 is approved. With no further business before the board, this meeting is now adjourned at 3:04 p.m.